All right. Without further ado, I'm so excited to introduce you to DeVone Holt, our fantastic speaker this morning. DeVone, most recently, was the former president and CEO of the Muhammad Ali Center. And you know, his whole career really has been dedicated to justice and transformation, so we're excited to hear him talk about growth. Give him a round of applause.
First off, how cool is this space, right? This is awesome. I saw on the news that this place opened, and I told my wife I got to get down there. Well, I'm here. And I am impressed, and I will be bringing others back with me. I hope you guys do too, because I think this is part of a boom that this community, our community, needs to experience. Something fresh, something hip, something cool, and something good. And then let's give it up for the team of Creative Mornings. They are doing an incredible job. I love their energy. I love what they stand for. And you guys read the creed here. The one that resonated with me more than anything else is that they believe in giving a damn. And I wish we had more people who gave a damn. And so kudos to you all for helping to advance that cause. Creative Mornings, for those of you who don't know, is a national organization. There's a Louisville affiliate, which is one of the largest affiliates in all the country. And so there's something special in the water here in Louisville, Kentucky, that is bringing people together for common purposes. And today, not just here in Louisville, but Creative Morning affiliates all around the country are talking about the subject of growth. You guys are challenged to ask your neighbors, those next to you this morning, about growth and how you've grown. But every person that's standing in front of an audience in the name of Creative Mornings this morning are doing the same thing. We are talking about growth, but we have all been given the opportunity to talk about it in our own respective ways. So today, I began thinking about how am I going to talk about growth to this incredible audience that I'm told is one of the first sellouts that you guys have had this year, right? So give yourself an applause. So just the idea that you got out of bed and came out on a cold, rainy, gloomy Friday morning says a whole hell of a lot about you all. So thank you for being here. But you think about growth, and as I was giving thought to this topic and how I wanted to talk about it, I began to think about it in a few different ways. And my initial thought was that Thanksgiving is coming up in a few days, and growth for me in a few days will mean elastic waist pants that I will need because I do plan to indulge. I've got a personal trainer, and he's got me on an incredible workout regimen and makes me take a picture of literally everything I eat because I'm out of control sometimes. And I need somebody to keep the guardrails on, but I've been given free rein to eat on Thursday, and I am going to lose my mind. So just be careful if you see me. But growth happens in so many ways, right? When we talk about growth and we think about it, so many of us look at it as individuals and think about growth and how that happens for us personally. Personal growth, what does that mean? You think about personal growth, and so many of us see that in the forms of physical fitness. I told you I have a trainer, and I make my way to the gym regularly to make sure that I'm fit, not just physically, but it's also part of my mental regimen. It's therapy for me. And so when you think about growth, many of us think about how we physically are preparing ourselves to be strong and fit. We think about what it means to be mentally strong. How do we grow mentally? My grandmother passed away a week ago today. Her name was Ann Lucas. She was a beautiful woman. She was born in the 1930s. But let me tell you about my grandma. She was committed to growth. Before she passed away, still sending people friend requests on Facebook. She paid her bills online, but she wouldn't text. And she decided it was time for her to embrace certain forms of growth when my mother put a tracker on my grandmother's phone. My grandmother would find herself driving and eventually wander off into places she didn't need to be because she wasn't as lucid as she once was. And I'll never forget, one day my grandmother went missing. My mother was calling her, she left our house, and she was supposed to be home in about 10 to 15 minutes, and my mother couldn't find her. So my mother pulled up the tracking app, and she spotted her. And my mother made her way to where my grandmother was. She had the video on. I've got this video. I'm going to post it on my social media because you got to see this. I love it. One of my favorite videos. She finds my grandmother in southern Indiana at the gambling room. And my mother walks up on my grandmother, who's at some slot machine, and she's got a camera, and she says, "Well, funny meeting you here." My grandmother turns around and she says, "Oh, shit." How did you know I was here? But my grandmother was committed to growth. She didn't allow her age to stunt her ability to tap into modern technology. We go from physical growth, mental growth, socially. So many of us, I think, are working to challenge ourselves to grow socially, to show up in different places, to meet new people, to experience new things. That's all part of personal growth. And then spiritually, so many of us recognize how important it is to be aligned and connected to a power that's greater than us. And so we spend time praying, fasting, meditating, all with the intent to make sure that personally we are growing. And so if those are things that are required for us to grow personally, I wanted to spend some time this morning thinking about how to talk about growth from a perspective that's near and dear to me. And that's growth as a community. How do we grow as a community? Yeah, we understand the things that are necessary for us to grow individually, but as a community, I think it's important that we spend time reflecting on the things that will make us healthier, will make us better, will position us for sustained growth. And so this morning, for a few minutes, I want to talk to you about what I call the QP model of community growth. What is that? QP, the quadruple P. 4 P's that I've outlined that help us understand how to foster community growth. 1, say it with me, people.
People.
Places.
Places.
Payrolls.
Payroll.
And parties.
Parties.
The 4 P's. And so let's dig into these 4 P's real quick, and I'll get you guys out of here and get your Friday underway. So the first one is people. And I want to be really clear about why this one is the first one. It's the first one because it is by far the most important P in this 4P quadrant. So if you think about this shirt I'm wearing this morning, I want you to think about people, the first P, in this way. When I put this shirt on this morning, if I would have put this first button in the wrong hole, no matter how much then I tried to align the buttons below, they would never, ever would have been properly aligned. Why? Because the first button is out of place. And if you get the first button out of place, no matter how hard you try, you will never get the rest of your buttons properly aligned. And the same goes with community growth. If we are serious about growing our community, we first have to start with the people here. You start with the people in your community and you invest in them in important and unique ways. So we think about community growth and we say that and we reflect on people, and I think our first inclination is to think about a growing population. And yes, that's important, it matters, but I want to be clear that a growing population is not the only way that we dissect what that means to grow people in a healthy community. I think we have to break down the demographics in that population. We have to look at the social economic status of people in that population, the health of the people in that population, the educational attainment levels in the people of that population. And when you do it, I would encourage you not to start at the top of the pyramid. Don't start at the top. We've all heard the saying before that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Well, I believe that a community is only as strong as its most vulnerable people. That's my belief. That's case, then yes, we can say Louisville, if you paid attention to the demographics, you see that slightly, year over year over year, we've grown. Our population has grown. But if we peel back the onion and get really detailed about what that growth looks like for us as a community, we will see that the growth in Louisville has been driven primarily by immigrant populations. Our growth is driven by people who are coming to our community seeking refuge. People who are coming to our community seeking an opportunity to make life better for them and their families. And they show up in our spaces and they're willing to roll up their sleeves. They're willing to make positive contributions to our community. But because of how they show up, let's be really clear, they become some of the most vulnerable people in our community. And so if it's our desire to grow a community and recognize that we need to make sure that we strengthen those who are the most vulnerable in our community, then it suggests then that we should invest in them in unique and special ways. What does that mean? Because when we think about our community and what we're experiencing, we recognize that immigrants are playing an important role in helping us grow. That also means, though, that there's still a brain drain that exists in our community. That means that the high school students who graduate in Louisville, Kentucky don't stay at a rate that we need them to. That means that the college students who graduate in this community don't stay like we need them to. And so in order for us to truly be effective in strengthening our community, it's important that we recognize the strategy should not be to help the strong get stronger. The strategy should not be to help the rich get richer. It should be to help the weak learn to stand on their own 2 feet, to help the weak learn to build self-sufficient lifestyles. It should be to help the poor find the ability to build profit-generating lifestyles that allow them to live the American dream. That's the model that we've got to build on. It's one that Martin Luther King Jr. Recognized when he said one of the most moving references that ever came from one of his speeches for me. We know King said a lot of wonderful things that we quote over and over again, but one of the things that resonates deeply with me that he said is that our destinies, ladies and gentlemen, our destinies are inextricably linked. Are inextricably linked. That means, believe it or not, what happens in Anchorage impacts what happens in Portland. What happens in St. Matthews impacts what happens in the Russell neighborhood. And we've got to recognize that even though we may live in different parts of the community, that our lives are intertwined in incredibly unique ways. Now, Martin Luther King said it very beautifully and elegantly. But James Baldwin said it another way. James Baldwin said, we have to understand that if I'm starving, you are in danger. You get that? He says, if I'm starving, you are in danger. Why are you in danger? Because a man who's starving is a desperate man. And a desperate man is a dangerous man. And we know that maybe not intuitively, but we know it subconsciously. You know how I know we know that? Because how I see so many of us respond when we find ourselves walking past homeless camps. We don't move in the same way we do when we find ourselves in circles with our friends and our loved ones and people that we know. Excuse me, I'm sorry. We move a little more tepidly because you never know. You never know what might trigger that person who's desperate. You never know what might trigger that person who's not sure where their next meal is coming from. And so we move and navigate around them in unique and different ways. And it is my belief that we have to move beyond this idea of looking at people who are vulnerable as charity cases and instead look at them as potential investments for us to make to shore up our community. And if those investments are not ones that you can make on your own, my challenge for you is to connect yourself with organizations like Goodwill, with Volunteers of America, the Louisville Urban League, Metro United Way, YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers, Big Sisters. There's so many organizations in our community who are working incredibly hard and incredibly smart to help us shore up this issue. So we go then from people to what was next. Remember people, places. That's right, people and then places. I've had an incredible career here in Louisville, Kentucky, and one of the great assignments that I've had in this community was to serve as the West Louisville Economic Development Director at GLI, the Chamber of Commerce. And in that role, once a quarter, I would work with the then mayor at the time to host what we call West Louisville bus tours. We would work with TARC, and they would donate us a bus and a bus driver, and the mayor's office and my team at GLI would go through this laundry list of people trying to figure out who needed to get to know West Louisville better. Because we felt like if they knew West Louisville better, they would be more apt to make investments in that community. And so we go through this list and we put people on the bus, and it never failed. Never, not once in all the time that we did these tours, that I got people on the bus and I asked the question, who's experiencing West Louisville for the first time? And invariably, when I asked that question, it never, ever failed, Gil. Never failed. People would raise their hands, more than a few people. And that's not a big deal until you consider that many of the people who raised their hands were people who were born and raised in this city. Think about that. Born and raised in this city, and you've never been west of 9th Street. Never ever been west of 9th Street. So what does that mean? That means your perception about the community is shaped by word of mouth. Your perception about the community is shaped by what you read in the headlines and what people whisper in private places. Your perception is shaped by what I call fear. Not just a sense of trepidation, but an acronym, FEAR, false evidence appearing real. False evidence appearing real. And so we put these people on the bus and they get an experience and see something different. And I'll be transparent, they saw the good, the bad, and the ugly. But they saw it all, and it gave them all different perspectives. And it's something about gaining a different perspective and understanding what that means in the sense of place that we have here in our community. I grew up in West Louisville, still live in West Louisville. West Louisville's home for me, and it has been. And I can live a lot of other places. My wife and I have made the decision, however, to plant our flag in West Louisville because we want to be part of the solution. And I have a fear that out of sight might mean out of mind, so I don't want to remove myself from the place that I feel like needs me more than any other place in this community. But I remember when I was younger, hearing about Portland neighborhood. So think about this. I live in the Shawnee neighborhood, and Portland is just a few blocks away. But growing up, I was told, don't go into Portland. Don't go into Portland. Portland was considered what was called a sundown neighborhood. Anybody know what a sundown neighborhood is? What's a sundown neighborhood?
You don't want, if you're a person of color, you don't want to be caught in there when the sun goes down.
That's right. If you're a person of color, you don't go there when the sun goes down. And I remember that was hardwired into my brain. And one night, a high school buddy of mine and I, he had just got his license. He was a year older than me, and we were driving around in his mom's car, and we didn't know where we were going. There was no GPS back then. And we found our way in the Portland neighborhood. I was terrified. And we drove around, and nothing happened. We drove around some more, and nothing happened. And I realized that as much as I had been told that this was a place that I needed to escape. The reality was that it was a fallacy that had been planted in my brain and gave me a false understanding about a neighborhood that was just a few blocks away from me. And so when I think about place for us here as a community, I want us to be mindful that we can no longer embrace this idea that there are certain places in our community that are untouchable, that are undeserving and unworthy of investment. Because place means something significant for a community that's interested and desires to grow. Places represent pride. They represent hope. They represent security. They represent comfort for people. Places have a sense of sacred meaning. They have a sense of building legacy for people and the ability for us to create identity. And so I want us to be mindful that as we build out a positive, strong future for our community, that it has to include a strategy to invest in places that have been overlooked, discarded, and put on the back burner for far too long. So we go from people, places, to payrolls. Payrolls, that's right. So some of you might be as old as I am. There's a few of you who look like you might have a gray hair. Well, you can't see my gray hair. I shaved it up. That's intentional, by the way. But there was a song in the 80s by a singer named Gwen Guthrie. And the name of the song was, see if any of you all remember this, Ain't Nothing Going On But the Rent. Remember that? Remember that? Ain't nothing going on but the rent. She says you gotta have a J-O-B if you wanna be with me. No romance without finance. Look it up, it's a beautiful song, I love it. I listened to it last night getting ready for this speech. But the point is that although things might sound great and you've got these great ideas and concepts, the reality is if you don't have money to fuel those ideas, you will get stuck in the mud. The idea of having great vision but no resources to advance those visions create frustrated dreamers. And I need us as a community to recognize that it's important that we invest in this notion of building a strong economy. A community that is growing is a community that finds ways to help its people put money in their pockets. It's not a foreign concept, it's something that we all know and understand, but the reality is if we don't do that right, things begin to fall apart in the community. So it's important that we have an economic strategy that makes sense, an economic strategy that builds jobs, an economic strategy that invests in local businesses, an economic strategy that allows money to flow into neighborhoods that exist in this community, and an economic strategy that invests and benefits the residents and not displaces them. I want to be clear about that. That does not displace them. That becomes important in 2025 when we talk about displacing not just residents, but workers. Because we live now in the age of AI. I've got a 16-year-old son who is a junior in high school. And as a junior in high school, he's already nervous about the future. Why is he nervous about the future? Because he believes that AI is going to make it difficult for him to find the job of his dreams. And what I have to tell my son is the same thing that we as a community have to understand, is that my son recognizes that the job that he will likely work in the future literally doesn't even exist right now. Think about that. The job he will work in the not too distant future doesn't even exist now. So how do you prepare yourself for a job that doesn't exist? Well, you do it the same way I did as a college student who didn't know what I was going to major in until my junior year. You invest in the fundamentals. You invest in those basic things that create certainty that you can function at a minimal level in these spaces that are going to require you to have soft skills and require you to do the things necessary to be a good employee and a good worker. So you create these fundamentals, like creating an environment that in this community that is conducive to business growth, where you've got tax codes and incentives, and you begin to remove the red tape from businesses that desire to grow in this community. You as a community invest in this notion of building highly educated, trained workforce like we did about a decade or so ago. How many of you all remember the movie called 55,000 Degrees? Remember, in this community, we were recognizing that if we were going to be competitive as a community, we needed about 55,000 more men and women to live in this community who had college degrees. And so there was a concerted effort to make sure that we moved the needle in increasing the number of college graduates with degrees who stayed here in our community. And then lastly, we have to invest in cultural amenities. You've got to invest in the things that make people want to be here in our community. And so those are economic models at work, and I remember trying to explain that to my grandmother and her friends years ago when they were trying to understand, when I was working at GLI, why it was so difficult for us to get a Walmart in West Louisville. Why did my grandmother and her friends have to drive 10, 12, in some cases 19 miles away to go buy things in other communities that people in those communities took for granted? Why couldn't we get a Walmart in our community? And I went through this process of trying to explain all these fancy economic strategies on why that didn't work, and I backed up and said, let me explain it in a different way. I said, imagine you have an affinity for bugs. I know it sounds goofy, but more specifically, moths. You love moths and you want as many as you can get. Well, there's two ways you can get them. One, you can get you a net and go spend a lot of energy and time chasing down moths, bringing them back to you, and hope that they stay. Or you can put out a bright light, and that bright light does what? It will attract the moths. And so for us as a community, we gotta do the things necessary to attract businesses that allow us to be a magnet to grow our economy, and that is the process that we have to take, and we have to do it in a way, ladies and gentlemen, that won't allow us to push great opportunities away when they show up. How many of you all know that the busiest airport in America is in Atlanta, Georgia? But it was supposed to be here in Louisville, Kentucky. Did you know that? Did you know that powers that be once upon a time said no to Delta Airlines when they were looking to relocate their All Points International Hub? They came knocking on the door in Louisville in the 70s, and Louisville said thanks but no thanks, and it went to Atlanta. And Atlanta then was a small community that wasn't nearly the size of Louisville. Look at it now. It all happened because of that investment. I remember when I was at GLI, and there was this conversation about us bringing an NBA team to town. And there was resistance to that idea, and this resistance, I continue to find, puts Louisville behind the eight ball as we consider how we grow and build our community. So we've got to think beyond that and go beyond people, places, payrolls, and then lastly, work our way into parties. So, parties. I went to Eastern Kentucky University, and I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Graduated from Dawes High School, I'll never forget this. My classmates and I were trying to figure out what we were going to college. Many of them had already made their decision. I had made mine. And our school put together a college tour. And we were going to visit a number of the state colleges here in Kentucky. And the very first school on our list was Eastern Kentucky University. And we went on Thursday and spent the night. Somebody already knows what that is, right? So then EKU was in the top 10 party schools in the country. Playboy magazine used to list the top 10 party schools in the country, and Eastern Kentucky was in the top 10 for most of my high school years. And I went to Eastern Kentucky University as a high school senior at Dawes High School, spent the night and went to a party and literally never applied to another school. I know. Fortunately, it turned out okay. EKU turned out to be a great school for me. I My wife went there. It was beautiful. I had a great experience. But I made a decision to go to a college because of a party. It feels funny saying that out loud. I don't know if I said that before. But here's why I say that. Because there's something special about throwing a good party. You know, it was enough to make me enroll at Eastern Kentucky University. The good thing about, I think, what we do here in Louisville is we know how to throw one hell of a party. You've been to Derby and you see all the events and activities, the Thunder of Louisville, the galas, the Bourbon and Beyond, and Louder Than Life. And my two favorites are the St. James Art Festival and World Fest. My two favorite events in Louisville, Kentucky. And I just believe that being able to throw a good party does two things. One, it has the ability to turn a visitor into a resident. And then lastly, I believe it has the ability to strengthen the people who live in this community in ways that allow them to increase their interactions, to begin to see their neighbors as more human, and we create more empathy for the people who live in our community. So people, places, payrolls, and parties. And I think lastly, if we can get that right, we put ourselves in a position to grow our community in really unique ways, and we do it in ways that I would hope you would consider like my grandmother did. So my grandmother, literally, it's not an exaggeration, for me, best cook in the world. Like, whose grandmother's not, but my grandmother really was. She's the best cook in the world. And she would cook so well that my mother, my aunts, my sister and cousins, neighbors and friends would all come up to my grandmother different times, and they say, "Granny, how'd you make that dish? How'd you make that dish?" My grandmother loved when they asked those questions. And I'll tell you something about my grandmother. She was incredibly generous. When they would ask her how she made certain dishes, she didn't withhold anything. She would give them the recipe. She would, in some cases, go in the refrigerator and literally give them the ingredients that she used to cook. Some cases, she would even give them the pots and pans that she used to cook the dish. And then they'd go cook the dish, and invariably, every single one of them came back to my grandmother. They'd say, "Granny, we did everything you told us to do, but guess what? It doesn't taste like yours. It doesn't taste like yours." My grandmother would love that. She'd smile, and she'd say, "Sweetie, I gave you everything that I had to give. I gave you the recipe, I gave you the ingredients, I even gave you the pots and pans." She said, "But there's two things I couldn't give you." She said, "One, my secret ingredient is that I love to cook." She said, "I absolutely love to cook. It is what I live for." She said, "The second thing that serves as my secret ingredient is I love who I cook for." She said, "I love to cook and I love who I cook for, and those are the differences that make the difference." And ladies and gentlemen, I believe if our community is going to continue to grow, we've got to have leaders who love what they do and love the people that they do it for. Louisville, know that I love you, and I appreciate you coming out this morning. Thank you very much.